Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Farmer. I am the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ Film Festival. This is our 37th year, and we have some amazing programming this year. As always, we have some terrific short films from around the world. One of the shorts that we premiered last weekend, we had the world premiere of actually with Silver Fox, a film that our programming team was very, very enamored with, and also our audiences have loved it as well. You have a little bit of time to watch it on streaming through next week. So I just wanted to talk to some of the principals of Silver Fox and have a conversation. So we're going to go around the room, let everybody introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump into some questions. We'll start with Julio.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Julio Vincent Gambuto, the writer-director, and I played Joe Fox in Silver Fox. And it's great to be with you. Hello from New York.
Thank you so much. Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Scrivani. I'm the producer of Silver Fox, among other roles on set that day and those days. But it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much. Dan
I am Dan Butler. I play Uncle Nick.
and Owen.
I'm Owen Vaccaro. I play Rocco in Silver Fox.
Nice. Thank you all so much for being here, and thanks for sharing this film with us. Well, just let me talk to Julia. I mean, how did this project come up for you?
It was sort of born out of the pandemic.
Mhm.
I got COVID in January 2021 for the first time and was in bed for 6 weeks and watched 13 seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race back to back. And I had seen episodes before. I had been to drag shows before. I've been out for 25 years. So obviously, drag has been a part of my gay experience for a long time. But really watching 13 seasons straight, I came away so grateful for the art of it all and just so happy that this performance art could be a part of my healing at the moment.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to write something that kind of honored the art and honored drag in general. And so one day Andrew came over, I got in the car and just sort of like blurted it out and it became Silver Fox. So it's a feature film that we want to make. And so this is the proof of concept short film version of it.
That's great. Andrew, how long have you and Julia known each other?
Uh, Julio and I have known each other probably close to 20 years now. Yeah, we were both working in education together, and that's how we stumbled upon each other before I got into the arts and before Julio went back to school to become a director. He was a performer prior to that, and we became friendly and we stayed friends as we sort of drifted off and found our own creative careers, and then kind of found our way back together with the forming of Borough 5, the film company. And this is our second film together, and hopefully for many, many more years to come.
That's great. I meant to do a brief introduction of the film. I think I forgot to do this. So let me read a brief introduction. In Silver Fox, America's favorite guncle, gay uncle, stand-up comedian Joe Fox finds himself cornered by his family in his dressing room. After touring the country, Joey returns for his hometown show with a secret. Tonight, he's doing the show in full drag. Um, Obviously, Julio, talk about this character and, you know, and his desire to finally reveal this and come out, in drag for the first time in his hometown.
Sure. So the whole, as Jim said, the whole film takes place in the dressing room.
Yeah,
This is the hometown show where Joe Fox has really come back to
yeah.
his kind of conservative New Jersey suburban town, and he's just been on a comedy tour, and tonight he's going to do the show for the first time in drag. And so, Joe has been uh, around the US. He's been online, he's been on social media. He's a known presence to his audience, but tonight is really different. So he's, really sort of looking out at friends and family and colleagues and aunts and uncles and people who have known him his entire life. And
Yeah.
this is the first time that he's going to be in a dress and heels. And I wanted to really tell the story of someone who, for whom this is a big deal.
Yeah.
I think a lot of drag performers, we know them in their present formation and iteration, but we don't always know their origin story. I'm not a drag performer myself, except in the film, but I was really intrigued by the idea of like, what is that first show, and what is the response from people who know you and love you well? And in this film, we get to see the response sort of from the angel and the devil, if you will, left and right, from his older gay uncle and from his younger gay nephew, who
Okay,
Dan
great.
plays and Owen plays.
Dan, tell us about Uncle Nick.
Well, with that devil introduction, um, well, what I love about the film is you see three generations and trying to get along, but not, there's just a misunderstanding. Sometimes literally through the language, just don't get the other one. But
Yeah.
I think, there's lots of things about being gay and being open. Uncle Nick came out late compared to other people.
Yeah.
But I think it's also what I love about the film. It's about creativity, and sometimes people saying both. Play it safe. Stick with the stuff that works and that works. And why are you testing new territory when you don't need to? You're already successful. And I think that's what's great about any creative venture. You're just diving into new territory, and it scares a lot of people. So it's and it all comes from love. Even saying what through one lens might be a negative thing you're hearing, it's I want to keep you safe. I'm looking out for you. So
Okay.
it's a lot of conflict. It's good.
And Owen.
Yeah, so I play Rocco, the angel to Dan's devil in the short film. And I had a ton of fun in this role because I saw a lot of, I suppose, myself in the character, in that I came out at a very young age and I sort of, I guess, represent the younger generation
Mm-hmm.
of queer people in this dynamic that we see in the film. So it was, like Dan said, super cool to kind of see and act out and kind of envision how these three generations would clash over this kind of dilemma, whether or not Mr. Silver Joe Fox would end up doing drag at his comedy show or not. But yeah, I had an absolute blast in the film, and it's really taught me, I think, a lot of it's made me think about, a lot of the stuff that I want to study I'm in college right now. So just kind of bringing this fresh perspective of queer studies and gender studies. These are all like new terms that I feel like now that people are understanding, there's a lot of focus around them. And I think it's awesome that we get to do those kinds of things through this film. And I'm really happy that I got to play this character that explores a lot of those themes.
Yeah, that's great. I was reading the notes earlier today, and Silver Fox pokes fun at the confusion of the modern world. Julio and Andrew, can you sort of talk about that aspect of this film?
Sure. I mean, I think, without getting too political, like the left, which is a part of the political spectrum that I'm very comfortable on and in, has sort of there's a certain newness to so much of the conversation.
Yeah.
And so that newness can really be troubling or challenging or comedic, depending on how you view it and how you engage in it. My dad is a hardcore right-wing Trumper, and so we go head to head all the time around issues of everything from economics to sexuality. But I think the short I wanted to explore, as Dan said, language for one, right? What is it like when you're just using different words to communicate?
Yeah.
I'm this middle generation for whom queer was a quote unquote bad word, and I think probably in Dan's world it was too. But the newer and younger generation has re-embraced it and is using it again and is redefining it and is re-narrativizing it, and it's incredible to see and feel and practice. But it's very strange to me because that's sort of what you got called as you were ridiculed as a kid. So being in the middle and sort of looking at an older generation and being so grateful for the steps that they took,
Mhm.
and not always saying thank you enough or loud enough, was important to me. But then also looking at a younger generation, and there's a certain envy, I think, about the freedoms that they seem to have to experiment and explore in ways that my generation probably held themselves back from.
Yeah.
I'm speaking in general terms, of course. But when you look at it, it's really has been carried out by all three generations, as we've marched forward. So those are what we, the themes and the issues that I wanted to kind of tap into, and as much through humor as we could discuss it.
Yeah. And
One of the things that we leaned into as filmmakers, Julio and I, is this idea of generational conflict. If you look back to our feature film, Team Marco,
Mhm.
it's also a film about generational conflict, and where we sort of inhabited the more sort of broader base world in Marco, focusing in on the gay and queer world in this film shows that there's a universality to generational conflict outside of gender and sexuality. And I think that was what provided a lot of the comedy in this, is the miscommunication aspect of language and expectations and sort of fear, and where those things are born. So I think that, leaning into that as much as we did in this film sort of provided a lot of the opportunities for laughs, but also a lot of the opportunity for understanding.
Exactly. Obviously at the center of this, Joey's going through his own conflict and deciding if he wants to do this or not. But all around him, you have these other characters, and you have these great conversations. And I'll just talk about generational divide, which I just found amazing. It sort of feels like I've had some of these conversations with friends. It just sort of feels I can completely identify with all the conversations. But just as actors, Owen and Dan, what did you? I mean, when you read this script, I mean, what did you? I mean, it just feels so authentic to me, and it feels like some, again, like conversations I could hear when I go outside and talk to some of my friends.
Well, I know my husband is a teacher and director at Brown University, so
Yeah.
he keeps me up to date with everything he's battling with, whether it's language or this is sort of passed by, but trigger warnings and all these things that are just baffle me. When I listen to them, I have probably Uncle Nick's response, which is, I have no patience for this. Let's just cut to the chase. And I have the best answer. So just listen to me and everything will be great. But it is fascinating how, it just shows you how lively language is, and that if you live long enough, you see it change multiple times. So I love all the characters in here trying their best to learn, uh, uh, despite their defenses and their knee-jerk responses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I completely agree with. Sorry, I'm a little sick right now. I completely agree with everything that Dan said, and I think also, at least just my experience when I read the script is, well, I come from Atlanta, which is very, very very liberal when you're in the city, but I mean, just 30 minutes outside by car, and it's a completely different place. So I do have experience with this kind of back and forth, older generation, younger generation. And of course, it was, I think, captured so amazingly in the film, which is part of why it was so much fun to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree. It was very awesome.
So every character here is queer, although they identify slightly differently. Can you sort of talk about that, Julia?
Sure. So I wanted to make sure that we represented the entire range of not only identities, but words and labels with which we identify ourselves. And so, if you start with the older uncles, they come from a world where they have heard and used every word, but where they identify as a gay couple. They are not married, although people think that they are. And they also come from a world where getting married was not ever an option until very, very recently.
Yeah.
And without touching on it directly, they come from a generation that saw AIDS
Hmm.
up close and personal, that was there, that were witness to that pain and suffering, um, individually with friends that they knew, but also collectively, within the greater society. So they use the word gay. There's even a moment where Uncle Nick sort of bemoans the fact that the gay flag has changed because he has sort of now finally gotten himself used to the gay flag, and what that meant, and there's a feeling of pride that he finally has come around to.
Yeah.
My generation and my character again is in the middle, and so he at one point sort of winks to the audience and says, "I still say gay." But I also use the word queer and I use the word homosexual with a little bit more freedom, and a little less of that stigma and shame, if you will, than that perhaps was assigned to it 30 and 40 years prior.
Yeah.
And then the younger generation uses the word queer. Owen's character, Rocco, brings along his friend, who in the feature we will find out is really his boyfriend, who's a trans character and is also played by a trans actor named Logan Rosos. He's also Black. And so we wanted to make sure that the entirety of the conversation was captured in as much as we could in 15 minutes. Obviously, Logan's character sees all of this conversation really, really differently. And then Uncle Nick's partner, husband in the film, who's played by Alec Mappa, Alec is Asian. And so we were able to sort of make jokes for sure, but also point the conversation at how white we all were having this conversation, privileged to have this conversation about words and language and sexuality and generational dynamics. Of course, that's all then completely shifted when it's seen through and spoken about through, from the other characters.
So now I'm really stoked for the feature film because I really am.
Thanks.
But I mean, where are you in this development? Are you just now developing into a feature, or are you just still working that out?
Yeah, I mean, so Andrew referenced our first feature film, which was Team Marco,
Yeah.
and in that we didn't do a short. By the way, Marco in Team Marco is played by Owen Vaccaro, quite brilliantly when he was 12 years old, 13 years old. So I'm incredibly proud to work with him again. He's
Yay.
an incredible actor and a fantastic and artful force. And it was just a privilege to work with Dan because I grew up watching Frasier, and obviously Dan's resume is way hardier than that one television show, but to know that Dan was an out gay actor in Hollywood before many people that we know, is always inspiring. So to get all these people together was incredible, and I think it has sort of given a lot of energy to thinking again about the feature,
Yeah.
because I wrote the feature before, I wrote the short as well. I bring up Team Marco because we didn't do a short film,
Mhm.
and when we finished the feature and we finished the cut of Team Marco, my first thought was, what would this process have been like had we done a short film and then the feature? What would we have learned? How would we have been inspired? What would have come of that? So this is a different tactic on our end as far as the creative development of the feature. And I'm really glad we're doing it this way because it gives us so much insight into the characters and it gives us so much insight into the world that we have to build.
Yeah.
And of course, actors who are as talented as Owen and Dan, bring their own perspective to all of the work into the script.
Yeah.
And so it starts to take on a little bit of a life of its own in a really nice way.
Yeah. Dan, this isn't a question, just more of a comment and commentary. Thank you for being out and visible at a time when not many people were. I mean, you've opened the doors for a lot of people. So, from my end, from I'm sure from a lot of people, thank you for your visibility and your candor.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and so talk to me about being an Atlantan. And how long?
Yeah.
I mean, have you lived all your life, or did you just move here? Or
Yeah, so I've lived in Atlanta my whole life. I right now I'm in school, so I don't live in Atlanta, but yeah, I absolutely adore Atlanta. It's so interesting to me how like my little bubble is so liberal and very small. And that's something that I think I realized, especially leaving Atlanta.
Mhm.
Because like I was saying earlier, like you just drive 30 minutes any direction and it's a completely different town. But I absolutely adore Atlanta and I'm always excited to go back. And I think also being gay in Atlanta is such a fun thing. It's a cool place to be out, which is amazing and liberating. Especially, I feel like I'm so privileged to have had the opportunity to come out at such a young age in a place that was so accepting. And the high school that I went to was like it was completely normal. It was never a thing, which I think is different from, I mean, obviously a ton of other people's experiences.
Yes, it is mind-blowing to Dan and to me.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I'm definitely really psyched now to keep, you know, progress on and seeing how the feature film develops and when you're going to do that. And do you expect to keep much of the same cast, or have you really thought about
I'd
that?
be honored to keep the same cast. Yeah. It would be an honor and a privilege to keep the same cast for sure. There are other characters in the feature as well. There's a character who's my character's father,
Hmm.
who is Dan's character's brother, who
Yeah.
is sort of talked about for the first act and part of the second, and then makes an appearance and joins the cast and joins the conversation. And he's a much more right wing, he represents a much more right wing perspective. And so you have a whole new appreciation for Dan's character when that character enters, because you now kind of see who Uncle Nick grew up with, how Uncle Nick came to sort of find himself in this situation where he came out in his 40s and 50s,
Mhm.
and what that fear was, what that um, sense of shame was, and how he had to negotiate it, which is why he's now kind of begging Joe, my character, to be cautious about how far and how forceful he pushes
Mm.
within the family.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the feature is sort of bigger and broader, but the whole feature takes place very much like the short film, where the short film was 15 minutes in the dressing room. The feature is the 90 minutes from the second my character walks into the theater
Okay.
till curtain goes up. Although now Saturday Night has done that, and they have a far bigger platform than we do. So, but I still like it as an idea.
Exactly. All right. The film is Silver Fox. It had its world premiere at Out on Film last week, and it's part of our Giving Our Funny on Short. It was very, very popular. It's also available to watch virtually through next week. I thank you all so much for talking to me about this. Julio, Andrew, Owen, Dan, thank you so much for this project. Thanks for sharing it with our audiences, and thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Pleasure.
All the
Thanks for
best.
having us.
Thank you
Thanks,
all so very
everybody.
much. Take care.
Appreciate
Great
it.
to see everyone.
Thanks.